Okay, welcome to Unit 2. So Unit 2, we're going to begin with our art historical discussion, and we'll be talking about ancient civilizations um, and what generally we mean as being different about these ancient civilizations compared to the Neolithic cultures that preceded them. And if you notice the words sort of dawn of ancient civilizations, that's there in part because just like the boundaries between what was the Mesolithic and the Neolithic are getting much more blurred, the Neolithic is being pushed back further, but also what we used to see as being this major revolutionary change, we're now seeing much more as gradual shifts. Well, the same is true for the transition from the Neolithic to the first ancient civilizations. Second thing I want to say before we get started is in a perfect world, when we were talking about ancient civilizations, we could cover not only the ancient civilizations of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, but we would also cover the ancient civilizations of the Indus Valley, as well as China, pre-dynastic China, or pre-Qin, and so as well as we could cover others as well, but there isn't a whole lot of time, so we're focusing just on uh, just on Egypt and Mesopotamia right now. I possibly will produce an extra video at some point as sort of an extra credit thing to cover some of those other ancient civilizations. And I'm picking ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia because they were two of the earliest, probably the earliest, and that they were strongly connected to each other. They had ties with each other for a long period of time, and both of them were strongly seen um, as antecedents, as things that led to not antecedents, I guess precedents, right? Things that led to classical Greece. So that's my second thing. Third thing I want to say before we start is this particular lecture, actually, the art historical period, gets a little bit longer than on some of the others because I'm not only going to cover ancient civilizations like all the way up to the end of the Bronze Age, but then I'm going to cover the Bronze Age collapse and then the empires that came after the Bronze Age collapse into the Iron Age, and how that then led to classical civilization. So, all right, that's a lot. So, to begin with, how do we define civilization? And remember, it is not a hard fixed rule. It's not like at 3,600 BC, no one was living in anything like a city, and then at 3,200 BC, there was tons of cities. But one of the main differences between the Neolithic and and the period that came after is cities instead of towns. The Neolithic is mostly towns of 5,000, 10,000, maybe 15,000, and whereas we're looking at much larger cities in ancient Egypt and ancient Mesopotamia, and most of these towns also would have been walled and fortified, and many had kind of like a center kind of citadel inside the main inside the town, or a kind of a palace center. Another major difference that we see is a greater degree of specialization of labor. Um, the archaeologists, from what we can see in the Neolithic period, there was, other than maybe a chieftain, there was generally like everyone did a lot of the same jobs. Everyone was a farmer, and everyone was to a degree a craftsman of some sort, and everyone was, or at least all the male population of a certain age, were willing and able to fight if need be. So there was no like strong division. Whereas when we get to the first ancient civilizations of Egypt, Mesopotamia, we see this development of hierarchy of different classes and specialization of labor, so that if you are a glass blower, then that is all you do. That you will blow glass as your job, or if you're a potter, as opposed to the Neolithic period where we see much more evidence of people who might have made pots, but they also farmed and they also kept animals, and they also maybe did other jobs, like maybe they did, you know, guard duty or whatever. Anyway, okay. And writing is probably, and record keeping are another really important part that's different. And then the rest of the differences are not so much defining, but they come with. And that includes a much more expanded use of metal, um, not just copper, but now bronze, and also, but still primarily cast and not forged metals, and a use of ceramics. But we saw ceramics in the Neolithic, but a much greater use of other crafts besides. I do apologize for the dogs barking at the cats. Okay, where was I? And in terms of government organization, we see city-states and kingdoms, and eventually we'll see empires. So we're going to talk about ancient Egypt first, just to show you some of what we're going to see. We're going to start with the Pal of Namur, which is a pretty important piece, and I'm going to talk about the Pal of Namur numerous times for a number of reasons. But for right now, the main thing we're going to talk about is what it says about the development of ancient Egypt from being pre-dynastic, a Neolithic society into a ancient civilization. And so the Pal of Namur is dated to about 3100 BC, and it says of a king Namur that this king, who may also have been Menes, we don't know, that this pharaoh unified Upper and Lower Egypt. And we can see evidence of that in that, like, see the two-headed snake lion creature, the way they're being bound together, that's the tying together of Upper and Lower. This also happens, this indention happens to be one of the places where the makeup was mixed. Let me say, just so you know, this is a palette, literally a palette, meaning that it's for mixing colors, most probably funerary makeup, so like makeup to be applied to the dead. And so that's one symbol of that. Another symbol is the fact that Namur here wears multiple crowns. He wears the crown of Upper Egypt in one part, and then over here, where he's victorious, he's wearing the combined crown of Upper and Lower Egypt together. This also includes, all his defeated warriors. There are other iconography in here that helps to tell us that this is the symbol of Namur unifying Upper and Lower Egypt. And with the unification of the two halves of Egypt, then we generally say that's the beginning of the dynastic period and the beginning of ancient Egyptian civilization. All right. I guess another thing I want to say before we move on is about the style of Namur, because one of the things that's really interesting, this is 3100 BC, right at the beginning of the dynastic period, maybe even a little bit earlier. And already we have a very Egyptian-looking artwork, and a lot of the style conventions are already set. So with the founding of a unified Egypt, we have the beginning of what we call Old Kingdom Egypt. The Egyptian history, or ancient Egyptian history, is divided into three main periods: Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom. And Old Kingdom lasted a really, really long time. We're getting close to the end, so I'm going to wrap it up here. So Old Kingdom was primarily lasted a really long time, and the artwork that was made very much reflects this sense of perpetual continuity of an eternal kingdom. It probably did feel to some of the people who lived in the Old Kingdom that that Egyptian civilization, Egyptian way of life and dominance was probably going to last forever. It did, in fact, last for nearly 1,000 years. Okay, I will end it there, and then I'll get to part